بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الكريم ما بعد. Alhamdulillah, today is the third day of the Hijjah. Third day of the Hijjah. Or is it fourth day? What day of the Hijjah is today? Fourth day, yeah. Fourth day of the Hijjah. And inshallah today is the third session from this session covering 99 hadith collected by Imam al-Sa'di rahimahullah. Today inshallah we'll cover from hadith 45 onwards. عن أسمر بن مدرس أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من سبق إلى ما لم يسبقه إليه مسلم فهو له رواه أبو داود. In this hadith, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that whoever got there first, then he has the most right. Whoever got there first, he has the most right. A good example of this is, for example, the masjid. The masjid is a publicly owned space, or rather, more correctly, it's waqf lillah. It's for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No one has the right to reserve a space. So whoever got there first, according to this hadith, that whoever got there first, he has the most right to be there. So for example, if a child comes and sits in the front, then no one has the right to move that child because the child got there first, or anybody else. The Shaykh in the book, he mentions some people sometimes reserve a space for the muaddin. You know the muaddin? They reserve a space in the front for the muaddin. And he says not even the muaddin has the right for a reserved space. Rather, all spaces are open to everybody. Whoever gets there first has the most right. Another example of this hadith is if you have land which is not owned by anybody, so like desert land, then whoever gets there first has the most right to own it. Of course, nowadays the land is probably owned by the state. If it wasn't owned by the state, if there was a piece of land, then whoever gets to the land first has the most right to that land. Brothers, you're distracting me. Hadith number 46. عن ابن عباس رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ألحقوا الفرائض بأهلها فما بقي فهو لأولى رجل ذكر متفق عليه. In this hadith, the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, he told us about the laws of inheritance. In the Quran, in the laws of inheritance, particularly in Surah An-Nisa, it's mentioned the proportions which certain categories should receive. So the way the inheritance is done is, first of all, if someone dies, then their funeral expenses are taken from the tarika. The tarika means the estate. So that's the first step. The funeral expenses are deducted from the estate. The second thing that's deducted from the estate is any debts. So if that person owes money to somebody else, then the debt, it must be settled first, settled after the funeral expenses. Thereafter is the wasiyah, and the wasiyah is that in Islam you're allowed to leave a bequest. Anyone know what the bequest? What's the maximum amount of the bequest? One third. So if someone left, I don't know, £10,000 behind, after all debts have been paid and funeral expenses have been deducted, the £10,000, then technically they can leave £3,333 to anyone they want. It doesn't have to, in fact it cannot be to an heir that's specified in the Quran and the Sunnah that they cannot receive from the bequest. However, it's not an obligation to leave a bequest. Prophet ﷺ said it's better you leave your inheritors rich than to leave them poor. So especially if they need the money, then you're better leaving the whole £10,000 to your inheritors. However, if you wish, you can leave 1/3 to anybody. You can leave it to anyone you like. So this is called wasiyah. This is called the wasiyah. So after the wasiyah, first of all, funeral expenses. Secondly, debts. Thirdly, the bequest. And after this, the wealth is divided in accordance to proportions in the Quran. If there's anything left after you have divided it, then there could be a sum of money left, because the proportions in the Quran, the fractions, and it could well be that the combination of heirs are such that once you've deducted the proportions, you have a certain amount left. And who should get this certain amount? Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Alhiqul fara'id bi ahliha," that give the inheritors their due portions. فَمَا بَقِيَ فَهُوَ لِأَوْلَى رَجُلٍ ذَكَرًا. Whatever is left, this is called the asaba. The asaba, whatever is left, and this is for the closest male relatives. Okay, everyone understand this? So first of all, you act in accordance with the proportions in the Quran, and whatever the remainder is, this then goes to the closest male relative. Okay, so for example, the uncle. The uncle normally wouldn't inherit. However, if there is something left over, then the closest male relative would be the uncle, and he would take that leftover portion. Is that clear? So that's like a very summarized. To be honest, I don't know much about inheritance rules, but it's an entire science in itself. Miraf. It's regarded as not only a chapter in fiqh, it's also regarded as a science in itself. And it's interesting to know as well that there are many differences of opinion in many of the chapters in fiqh. However, with regards to inheritance, the ikhtilafat, they're very, very little. Okay, most of the madhahib, they concur on the ikhtilafat, on the inheritance. Hadith number 37, عن أبي أمامة الباهلي رضي الله عنه قال سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول إن الله قد أعطى كل ذي حق حقه فلا وصية لوارث رواه أبو داود والترمذي وابن ماجه. This hadith is basically similar to the previous hadith. It's about inheritance, and in the hadith, Prophet ﷺ is saying that Allah has given every person that has a right their right. فلا وصية لوارث. It's not permissible to leave a bequest to an inheritor. Okay, so the inheritors, you can't give, if somebody is due to have a half, you can't say, okay, you can have a half and then I'm going to give you some extra. Okay, so it has to be in accordance with the proportions. You can't then circumvent the rules by leaving a bequest to give one person more than the other people. Okay, so that's the idea of the wasiyah. Hadith number 48 عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ثلاثة حق على الله عونهم المكاتب يريد الأداء والناكح يريد العفاف والمجاهد في سبيل الله رواه أهل السنن إلا النسائي. In this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said that the three people who Allah will help them. He will help them. The first of all is al-mukatab yuridul ada. Al-mukatab is a slave. That in Islam, if you have a slave, then the slave can buy his or her own freedom. Okay, they can agree with the master that if I give you such and such a sum of money, will you free me? So if the master is agreeable to this, then there can be a deal that the slave in installments pays his master and then he is freed. So the first person deserving of the help of Allah is the slave that wants his freedom such that he can worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he wants his freedom for a higher purpose. He wants to worship Allah Jalla wa ala like a free person will worship, because a slave can't worship like a free person can worship. A slave can't go to the masjid. The slave has to do exactly as his master commands him to do. Of course, a Muslim slave still has to pray. However, he can't just do whatever he wants. So whoever wanted to be free of slavery for the sake of Allah, then Allah, He will help him. The second person is a nakih yuridul afaf, that the person who wants to get married to protect his chastity, such that he is protected from haram. So the reason why he wants to get married is for a very high aim. Somebody help, that person's trying to enter. Okay, so if somebody wants to guard his chastity, that's the whole reason he's getting married, then Allah Jalla will help him. And in many countries, getting married is very, very difficult because it requires large sums of money. So we say to them that if you make your aim for getting married for the pleasure of Allah, to save yourself from the haram, then Allah will help you. Going back to the first category, which is the slave who wants the freedom. Another example of this is the one who borrows money but has a sincere intention of repaying the money. Because sometimes people, they borrow the money and they have no intention of repaying the money. They're hoping that maybe the person who loans them the money will let them off. Yeah? You've seen this kind of person? They borrow the money, but really what they're really doing is they want the money. If you sincerely want to repay the money, then Allah, He will help you repay the money. And the second one, if you want to get married, to guard your chastity, then Allah, He will help you get married. And the third is the mujahid, the one who fights to make the word of Allah supreme. If he does this fi sabilillah, for the sake of Allah, then Allah, He will help him. For example, if he bought some equipment he needed for the jihad fi sabilillah, then Allah Jalla wa Ala, He will help him get that equipment because he did it for the sake of Allah. So the common denominator, the common thread between these two categories is that if someone did something sincerely for the sake of Allah, then Allah, He will help them. Okay, everyone understand that? Okay, next hadith is hadith number 49. And Aisha radiallahu anha قالت قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يحرم من الرضاعة ما يحرم من الولادة. In Islam we have something called suckling. Anyone heard of suckling before? Okay, you're not suckling. Okay, we have something called suckling, and basically if a woman suckles somebody else's child 5 times, and the child is under 2 years of age, then that child becomes a child of that woman. Okay, so that child is not a blood, it's not a blood relation of the woman, but by suckling 5 times. Yeah. So by suckling 5 times, you can suckle anyone else's baby 5 times, and the baby is less than 2 years old, then that baby is now your son or daughter. You know this? Okay. And by son or daughter, it means that that child, when he grows up, that child, then that woman is a mahram. They're now mahram. They're now mahram, and also they're not allowed to marry. There's no hijab. There can be khalwa. Does anyone do this anymore? Anyone heard of this before? Yeah. Okay. So this is the concept of rada'a, and the Prophet ﷺ said that the suckling, it makes haram the same thing as birth would make haram. So the children, they would be like suckling brothers, suckling sisters. So some people still practice it, but it's it's something which is there. الحديث الخمسون, hadith number 50. And أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا يفرق مؤمن مؤمنة إن كره منها خلقا رضي منها آخر. The hadith is quite an important hadith, and it means that the Prophet ﷺ said that if a believer hates, a believing man should not hate a believing woman. Okay, and if he dislikes a quality in her, then for sure he will be pleased with another quality in her. Okay, so a believing woman, meaning you should not dislike your wife, or the wife should not dislike the husband, because even though no one's perfect, if you see a fault in her, then for sure she has some goodness in her. Okay, and the Shaykh actually in the book, he talks about the high incidence of divorce, especially in the beginning of marriage. You find it's very, very common, you find people getting divorced within the first few months, yeah? It's very, 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 very common. And he says, don't sit like that, brother. He says that, well, one of the reasons is that people, they have expectations, especially now with social media and things like this, with Bollywood, and you know, you're looking at your wife, and you know, she's not the supermodel you saw on social media. She's not perfect. You know, but people, no one is perfect. No one's perfect. This is the problem, that especially the youth, they're now looking at women as like, you know, some kind of fantasy. So in the real world, people are not perfect. People are not perfect physically, nor are they perfect in terms of character. So this hadith, it shows us realism that, you know, when you look at your wife, then look at her as a human being. She's a believing woman, and for sure she has some good in her. So some things you discover afterwards that, you know, they're not perfect, but other things that they're good. So it's that realism. The Shaykh also mentions in the book, he speaks about the importance of researching your spouse. He said another reason for high incidence of divorce is that people, they don't actually research. Unfortunately, people, they don't disclose as well. Before marriage, there are certain things which should be disclosed. So if somebody has a physical ailment, then that ailment, it should be disclosed before the marriage. You shouldn't hide. I know of brothers who were duped into marrying women who they had some physical ailment, and only afterwards they discovered this, and then it was a divorce. So there should be disclosure. Of course, there are certain things which you don't have to disclose. Like, we all make mistakes. We all make mistakes, and we all have, everyone's got skeletons in the cupboard, if you like, for want of a better expression. However, there are certain things which should be disclosed, which, if they found out about them later on, then that could lead to separation or divorce. The Sheikh mentions that generally, if you look at a woman and you like her, and the woman looks at the man and she likes him, then he said generally things will be okay, and the only reason why a divorce could happen is because maybe there is something in the character. So this hadith is very, very important hadith. It's about being real and researching marriage and that realism in marriage. Okay. Hadith number 51. عن عبد الرحمن بن سمرة رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يا عبد الرحمن بن سمرة لا تسأل الإمارة فإنك إن أوتيتها عن مسألة وكلت إليها وإن أوتيتها عن غير مسألة أعنت عليها وإذا حلفت على يمين فرأيت غيرها خيرا منها فأت الذي هو خير وكفر عن يمينك. This hadith is about seeking leadership, and the Prophet ﷺ said to one of the Sahaba that don't seek leadership. Don't ask for leadership, because if you ask for leadership, then you will be left, meaning that Allah Jalla wa Ala will not help you, because when you seek leadership, then in effect what you are doing is you're praising yourself. You're saying that I'm the best, that I am the most befitting. So as a general rule, it's not something praiseworthy seeking positions of leadership. However, there could well be a situation when you know that you are the best person, the most suitable person. It could be obvious. For example, certain types of leadership, they require knowledge, and you're the only person in the room who has that knowledge. So instead of being shy and watching somebody else take that position of leadership who is unqualified for that position, in that situation you can propose yourself to be the leader. However, all things being equal, then you should not seek the leadership. This hadith basically mentions this. And the Shaykh actually mentions the ayah in the Quran about Yusuf alayhi salam when he said, قَالَ اجْعَلْنِي عَلَى خَزَائِنِ الْأَرْضِ. He said that make me the treasurer, make me the treasurer. So he suggested that he should be the treasurer. So in certain situations, you can propose yourself as the leader. However, all things being equal, you should not seek leadership. Many people, unfortunately, they seek leadership and then they don't fulfill the trust in our community. It's very common. You see people take leadership and they don't do it correctly. I'll come on to the bit about the Yameen in a minute. الحديث الثاني والخمسون حديث number 52 أن عائشة رضي الله عنها قالت قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من نذر أن يطيع الله فليطيعه ومن نذر أن يعصي الله فلا يعصيه رواه البخاري. This hadith is about oaths, which is called nadhar. And the meaning of an oath is that you obligate something upon yourself. Like, for example, the fasting, the only obligatory fasting is the fasting in Ramadan. There is no other obligatory fasting, not even the day of Arafah, not even the day of Ashura, not even the white days, not even Mondays and Thursdays. None of this is wajib. Okay, it's not an obligation. There is no sin. If somebody decided they're not fasting anything else other than Ramadan, then there's no sin. However, there's another way somebody can obligate fasting or any other act of worship, and that's by making an oath, or taking an oath and saying that I have taken it upon myself for the sake of Allah, I will fast all of next week. So he's taken another, he's made another. There's two types of oath you can take. One is called a general oath, and the other one is called a conditional oath. And the general oath is you say, for the sake of Allah, I'm going to fast next week. And this is something which is praiseworthy. يُوفُونَ بِالنَّذْرِ وَيَخَافُونَ يَوْمًا كَانَ شَرُّهُ مُسْتَطِيرًا. Allah Jalla wa Ala, He praises those people who fulfill their oaths. So they make an obligation upon themselves that I'm going to do an act of worship. Then we have the conditional oaths. I remember as a child we used to do a lot of conditional oaths, not knowing that they're called conditional oaths. And this is, for example, saying, Ya Allah, if I pass this exam, I'm going to give some sadaqah. You done this before? Ya Allah, if I get this, then I will do this. You know, done this before? Okay, yeah. I used to do this, Ya Allah, I'm making such that I get this job, then I will do this, I will do that. And this is this kind of oath. This oath is makruh, is disliked. And the Prophet ﷺ described this oath as like getting sadaqah from someone who is miserly. Okay, this is like, you know, sadaqah from someone who is a miser. So it's not good practice striking a deal with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that if you give me this, I'll give you that. Okay, rather you can take an oath, and it's a general oath, that I'm taking an oath that I'm going to pray tomorrow night, all night. Okay, this is okay. But to say I'm taking an oath, I'm only going to pray tomorrow night, all night, if I get a 9 in my GCSE. Okay, so this is not a good way of doing an oath. And in this hadith, Rasulullah he said that whoever made an oath to disobey Allah, then he should not disobey Him. So, needless to say, that if you took an oath, I can't imagine someone taking an oath that they will disobey Allah. But anyway, sorry. Yeah. If someone decided not to take, not to do the oath, then he can break the oath, but he has to do kafaratul yameen. Kafaratul yameen, I think it's fasting 3 days. Kafaratul yameen. Of feeding 10 people. Kiswatuhum. Tahrir raqaba, or freeing a slave, feeding 10 people, or clothing them. So, or 3 days fasting. And whoever, there's tartib, there's an order. First of all, you either feed 10 poor people. To break the oath, you either feed 10 poor people, clothe them, free a slave. If you're unable to do this, or you don't find the slave, then you fast. فَمَنْ لَمْ يَجِدْ فَصِيَامُ ثَلَاثَةِ أَيَّامٍ. And then he fasts 3 days. So the first level is feeding. So many of us, we can feed 10 people. It's not that difficult. Okay, everyone understand, okay? Anyone take oath? Okay, no. Generally, I've never taken an oath before, that I will do this. Okay, hadith number 53. عن علي رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم المسلمون تتكافأ دماؤهم ويسعى بذمتهم أدناهم يرد عليهم أقصاهم وهم يد على من سواهم ألا لا يقتل مسلم بكافر ولا ذو عهد في عهده. This hadith is quite topical. It says al-Muslimuna tatakafa'u dima'uhum, that the blood of all Muslims is equal. Okay, and the Shaykh in the book he actually speaks about this. He says all Muslims, they are the same regardless of color, regardless of whether it's Arab or non-Arab, whether Qurayshi or not Qurayshi. All Muslims tatakafa'u dima'uhum. Okay, so he established the only thing which distinguishes two Muslims is what? Is the taqwa, the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is the only thing, that if somebody is more practicing, if you like, then they are better than somebody else. So just because you're from a certain country or you have a certain nationality, this does not give you precedence. وَيَسْعَى بِذِمَّتِهِمْ أَدْنَاهُمْ وَيَرُدُّ عَلَىٰ أَقْصَاهُم. That the Muslims, they should aid one another regardless of whether they are. So if a Muslim is in one part of the world, then they should help a Muslim in another part of the world. So it's a global fraternity, a global brotherhood. Everyone with this? Okay. وَهُمْ يَدٌ عَلَى مَنْ سِوَاهُمْ. That all the Muslims, they are together like one hand. The Muslims, they should not be split, they should be together like one hand. If anyone harms them, then they act together. Just like in Palestine, all Muslims, we should support Palestine regardless of which country we're from or which area, which language we speak. We are all Palestinians. When it comes to this issue of Palestine, we are all Palestinians. And then it speaks about another issue, which is the issue of qisas. The issue of qisas is if there was a situation of murder, okay, this may sound politically incorrect. If there was a situation of murder in Islam, we have a rule that if a Muslim murdered a non-Muslim, okay, of course murder is haram. There's no doubt about this. Murder is haram. However, the hadith goes that if a Muslim kills a non-Muslim, then should we kill the non-Muslim or should we not kill him? For sure, sorry, should we kill the Muslim? Okay, so if a murderer is a Muslim, okay, and the murdered is a non-Muslim, then according to the rules of Islam, what should we do with the murderer? You don't kill him. You don't kill him. Somebody may say, well, that doesn't sound fair. This is the hadith, لا يقتل مسلم بكافر. Anyone heard this before? لا يقتل مسلم بكافر. Of course, there'll be some other punishment. There'll be some other punishment, but you won't reach the level of qisas. Okay, so this is the way it is. This is لا يقتل مسلم بكافر. And then in the same hadith, this does not mean that you can just get away with it. Rather, the hadith says وَلَا ذُو عَهْدٍ فِي عَهْدِهِ, that if somebody has an agreement, if somebody enters a land, they have an agreement, then they cannot be killed. So you can't just kill someone from a different religion, so we'll kill them. This is haram. Okay, murder is murder. However, the Prophet he said that if someone has an agreement, meaning they've entered the land legitimately, then they cannot be killed. So there's two sides to it. That number one, that a Muslim is not killed because he killed a non-Muslim, and secondly it's not permissible to kill anyone who has a legitimate right to be in a land. Okay, I think I explained that sufficiently. But I know it may sound strange, but this is the text of the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Hadith al-Rabi al-Khamsun, the 54th hadith, and the hadith says, أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من تطبب ولم يعلم منه طب فهو ضامن. This hadith basically says that if someone pretended to be a doctor, okay, if someone pretended to be a doctor and they're not known to have studied medicine and they caused the death of somebody or someone to have some kind of illness, then that person should be compensated. Okay, should be daman, they should be compensated. And similarly, if somebody pretended they were an engineer and they resulted in a disaster, then they should compensate the people that were affected by their incompetence. Okay, wrong with me? Okay, so in any field, if somebody claimed proficiency and they were not proficient, then a rule of the Sharia is that they must compensate. And the converse applies, that if somebody was a doctor and they made a mistake, okay, and people do make mistakes, they made a mistake in their diagnosis, then they do not have to compensate. So as long as somebody, they were proficient, generally they are proficient, and they made a mistake, then there is no compensation. However, if somebody was not competent and they made a mistake, then they must give compensation. Is that clear? Okay, so this is another rule in the Sharia. Okay, then we have hadith number 55. And Aisha radiyallahu anha قالت قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ادرأوا الحدود عن المسلمين ما استطعتم فإن كان له مخرج فخلوا سبيله فإن الإمام أن يخطئ في العفو خير من أن يخطئ في العقوبة. This hadith is regarding hudud, regarding punishments in Islam. And what it's saying is that wherever it's possible to repel the hudud, we should try to do so. Okay, so if somebody had done zina, wal-i'iyadhu billah, well, what's the punishment for zina? Anyone know? Okay, rajam. Rajam means being stoned to death. And what is it? Idra'ul hudud anil muslimin. That try to that's the best way. Idra'ul hudud anil muslimin. Try to avoid the hudud. Meaning, an example is there was a Sahabi and his name was Ma'iz. And Ma'iz, he had done zina. And he went to the Prophet ﷺ and said, I've done zina. And the Prophet ﷺ asked him that maybe you didn't do zina, maybe you kissed her, or maybe you did something less than zina. So he tried to find an excuse for Ma'iz. Okay, are you with me? So, idra'ul hudud. إِدْرَأُوا الْحُدُودِ عَنِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. So the Prophet ﷺ was looking for a way out for Ma'iz. So looking for a way to stop him being stoned to death. Okay? So he tried to, give him a way that maybe you didn't go all the way. Maybe you just did this. Maybe you touched her. Maybe you did something else less than full intercourse. Okay? So when Ma'iz said, no, I actually did the full thing, then at that point he commanded that the punishment be implemented on Ma'iz. Okay, is that clear? So wherever the Imam is able to find a way out, he should look for a way out. And then the Prophet ﷺ, he said that it's better for the Imam to make a mistake in forgiving than to punish and make a mistake. Okay, everyone understand the general idea? So the idea is that we're not bloodthirsty in Islam where we're just trying to implement the had wherever we can. Rather, the Qadi, the judge, should make every attempt to steer away from the punishment if he is able to do so legitimately. However, if it's clear cut, if the matter is clear cut, and the Qadi, the judge, he has to implement the punishment. Okay? Some people are looking really concerned. Okay. I think we've covered all the hadith for today. Tomorrow is hadith number 65. So jazakumullahu khairan wa sallallahu alaihi wa sallam nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Yeah. The Muhsan, yeah. You're talking about the Rajm, the stoning, yes, the stoning. I didn't explain it. Yeah.